This is talking foreign policy, an internationalist perspective on Canada's role abroad, and I am Yves Engler. Over the weekend, the NDP had their federal convention in Hamilton, and at the convention, foreign policy seems to have both been kind of ignored and right at the center of the proceedings. To discuss some of what happened on the foreign policy front at the NDP convention, we have Julius Scott, who is a member of Socialist Action on the executive of the Ontario Public Sector Employees Union, and a member of the NDP Socialist Caucus. Julius had his credentials taken away amidst protests around Palestine at the convention, and so Julius, first of all, thanks for doing this, and just can you give us a little bit about what happened with these protests at the NDP convention over Israel's crimes against humanity in Gaza?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can tell you from my own perspective what happened. So I wasn't involved with organizing these actions. I was a delegate participating in the federal NDP convention. It was Saturday, which was the full day for doing business within the convention. And I was a delegate inside the room. I heard some noise coming from outside into the common area. I didn't know what it was. I kind of made my way to the door. I was kind of curious as to what was going on. And I heard, some slogans around, supporting Palestine and free Palestine. So I made my way out into the common area and saw that there was an action taking place that was for Palestine. And it was designed to pressure the leadership of the NDP to have a much stronger stance against apartheid and against the occupation that's taking place in Palestine. So I participated in that action. This is actually not the first time that such an event has taken place during an NDP convention. And in fact, a few years ago, there was a similar action, although it was larger, I would say, that actually took place within the convention room, within the convention center. I will say that all of this happened. I'm assuming the organizers planned it to take place during the speech of Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the federal NDP. So we participated in this action. I will say that the police were there. I observed the police were blocking the protesters in a staircase. There were a few Palestinian activists who were kind of closer within the common area. And everyone was shouting slogans and raising awareness as to what was going on. As a delegate, I participated, and I actually was warned by Anne McGrath, who's the national director of the NDP, to stop my participation in the action, in which I refused. I made it very clear that I was a delegate, holding up here it is, my credential, of which a Democratic Party, or supposed Democratic Party, gives out to supporters and members of the NDP to participate in the convention. So the action continued. There was a lot of media. There was a lot of tension. After the fact, from what I understand, I'm not sure that it had the impact within the convention room as much as folks had hoped. I think that the room was just very soundproof, and Jagmeet Singh was speaking, and I think that it may have overpowered the action. However, on the outside, it was a bit of a scene. It was very intense. There was a lot of passion, a lot of people being very upset with the NDP's lack of action. There were pro-Israeli, pro-Zionist people there as well, who were vocal. I had one interaction with one individual, but in my view, I think that and based on the history of the NDP, felt much more comfortable in the NDP leadership, sort of towing the line of Western imperialism and in support of Israel. So what ended up happening was after the action ended, and I guess I'll just continue on.
I just want to actually step in quick. There
Sure. Yeah.
was a media report before. There were a number of media reports before the convention that the Palestine question was going to be a big issue at the convention. There was also a media report that said that the NDP had actually paid for extra private security because they were aware there was a chance there would be protests from pro-Palestinian. So for forces, and so I know a lot of people who were critical that there were some Palestine Solidarity people who weren't allowed to get credentials to not the formal credentials, but I guess visitors. There was some like the representative of CEJA, the main apartheid lobby group, Marciano, or I forget his exact name. He was there, and I think he got a formal observer credential, and whereas the Palestine Solidarity people weren't being given that opportunity. But the other question, I guess, is also a little bit about just the criticism is that you have this all this horrible siege and violence against Palestinians in Gaza, and Jagmeet Singh has really taken this. Initially he's all about condemning Hamas, but he's not willing to condemn Israel's violence. And I think that was more of, I don't know the specifics, what they were asking of the NDP. I think the protests were calling on NDP to condemn the siege of Gaza, occupation, and call Israel an apartheid state. But can you give a little bit more kind of in that direction of like what they seem to be calling for and what Singh has been saying or not saying?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that in general, the approach of not just the NDP, but I would say the approach of most social democratic movements here and around the world is to parrot the both sides are equally wrong approach, and that has been the sort of compromise almost, as you stated originally. The focus was purely on Hamas. When frankly, the leadership of the NDP and activists know that the repercussions for the violence that Hamas inflicted on Israeli society would result in the deaths of thousands of innocent people who have no connection to Hamas whatsoever. But they parroted the line, and I think that the call for these activists was for the NDP to condemn the occupation, which is responsible, frankly, for creating the environment in which Hamas has grown and has acted. So I think that in general, that was what the demands were, that the NDP was not taking a strong enough position, and that it should have. There's a long history within the party now of activists pushing for the international boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign, which I support. And every effort has been made by the party leadership, the current and former leadership, to prevent the party from adopting this international peaceful campaign, which would pressure the Israeli government to drop drop all of its, I would say, sanctions and occupation of Palestine and Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza.
I thought that there was Niall Ricardo, who is a kind of a left NDP activist who's involved in Palestine Solidarity. He was quoted in the Toronto Star just before the convention, saying that the NDP's really improved on Palestine over the past handful of years, which is, I think, partly true. Of course, Thomas Mulcair was this, former leader of the party, said he supports Israel in all situations and all circumstances, and was a deeply anti-Palestinian figure. But what struck me in Ricardo's quote in the Star was he was saying that it was due to Singh's leadership and Heather McPherson and because of campaigning within the party. And I agree with that to a certain extent. I know you yourself have been campaigning within NDP on this issue. But what I think is being left out of that is that there's also this criticism of the party, and there's a faction of Palestine solidarity within the party that's not willing to actually criticize the party when they suppress debate around Palestine, like they've done at multiple conventions. Most egregiously in 2018, it was just flagrant suppression. So to me, that really missed the fact that, yes, there is this work that a segment of Palestine solidarity people within the party have done, and kind of framing it always in a very positive light. Like, this is the NDPs, they usually stand up for what's right, and what's right is the Palestinian rights, and ignoring the fact that there's also the reason that there was success in 2021 in getting the Palestine resolution, I think in large part was because it was also this aggressive criticism by people like Socialist Action or Socialist Caucus, but also other outside Palestine solidarity and left forces. Any thought on that? And also on what was actually, there was ultimately an emergency resolution that was agreed to. Yeah, can you also just sort of describe that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important to acknowledge that there has been a shift in the NDP's position on Palestine, particularly around arming, sending arms to the Israeli government. All of that, that is important, it's significant, but it is a direct result of the work of Palestine solidarity activists within and outside of the NDP. I would say, in particular, those of us who are within the party, who have been pushing on this issue for a long time. But it doesn't mean that we're not used as a scapegoat, that we're not, blamed for being disruptive and trying to ruin the NDP's chances of winning elections. I mean, I was in the convention center, and Heather McPherson was on a panel and attacked the activists, the Palestinian activists, for the action that took place earlier in the day. It was absolutely shameful, along with supporting, taking away the credentials of two candidates who are running for executive positions of the NDP. So I don't really, I think that the leadership of the party is opportunistic, and when there's enough pressure, they'll shift their focus slightly. But we just need to keep the pressure on, because I think that it's becoming increasingly difficult, not just for the NDP, but within society at large, for a lot of these, some of these political parties, but particularly within the workers' movement. I think people are asking a lot of questions. I mean, it's a glaring contradiction that we're witnessing in terms of civil society and the government support, for instance, for a self-determination of Ukraine. And at the same time, looking at the treatment of Palestine and the Palestinian people. It's all over the TV. It's all over social media. Just an absolutely glaring example of murder on a mass scale. And I think that a lot of people, frankly, are shocked. And I think that a lot of delegates are in shock. And I did see a clip of Heather McPherson on the television recently, being very emotional about the deaths of Palestinians. But I have to say that in the NDP convention, I didn't get that from her or from the leadership really at all. In fact, it seemed that there was much more of a focus of coming down hard on any effort at challenging the status quo on the issue of Palestine and other issues as well within the party.
And so, just to just say, so there was a resolution, emergency resolution, that was put out, which it condemned Hamas, and it criticized Israel's siege. So it's I think a small improvement from some of the rhetoric that was coming out in previous days. But I believe that was passed unanimously. Some of the media reports. I know there was another emergency resolution that was a bit stronger. I think that got just pushed aside, is my understanding. But just about the resolution and the fact that the resolution didn't reiterate the 2021 resolution about no arms to Israel and no settlement products.
Yeah. So I don't know that So the passing of the emergency resolution, for what I understand, because I wasn't in the room at this time, my credential had been pulled, I'm not sure of the timing, but I wasn't in the room. Either I wasn't physically able to get into the room because my credential was pulled, or it happened after. I was unable to participate. But the resolution, the emergency resolution, does call for the end of the siege on Gaza that's currently taking place, a ceasefire, and saving life-saving humanitarian assistance for Gazans. But there was no reference, for instance, to the occupation of Gaza, of the West Bank. And there was no mention of the BDS campaign, boycott, divestment, and sanctions either, which, there's no context provided in the language that was adopted by the NDP. So I think my impression is that there was some compromise that the leadership offered up to those who think that they weren't doing enough, but not nearly enough in my view.
And so shifting to other issues, the media reported almost nothing else on foreign policy within the NDP convention. There was a CBC article I saw that listed some of the resolutions that could have been discussed. Usually a very small number end up being even discussed. Among those resolutions, I saw one that the CBC's is sort of their summary that came across as very sort of China bashing, and another one similar kind of with Iran, another one that seemed to focus on foreign interference. A list of about 7 or 8. None of them actually seemed particularly interesting resolutions. But what's your understanding of what ultimately sort of passed or got discussed even on other international issues at the convention?
I think that, every time there's a convention at the NDP, there are hundreds, if not more, resolutions that are submitted. The NDP Socialist Caucus, for instance, sends many resolutions on foreign policy and domestic issues. But this was not a convention, and most of them are not conventions where foreign policy is placed in priority. I do understand that there was an emergency resolution in support of the Sikh community versus Hindu nationalist Modi, which passed. It basically called for diplomatic sanctions. But other than that, I don't know of any specific resolutions that were actually brought to the floor of the convention and debated around foreign policy. It was focused on the convention was focused on domestic issues around supporting public health care and that type of thing, which is part of the course for the NDP, which is good. Human rights issues within Canada, that type of thing, as well as a few constitutional amendments, some of which were brought. One in particular was brought forward, which would allow the party leadership centrally to have much more central control over electoral district associations and how they operate, which was defeated resoundingly, which is a good thing. As I mentioned to you before we began, I wasn't there for the full convention, so I can just report on what I saw in the conversations that I had with some of the folks that I work with who were there for the convention.
Yeah, there's always that tension, and about the time. I know that is a real issue of having the proper time to discuss these things. Unfortunately, on the foreign policy issues, and I guess issues more generally, is that if they don't get discussed and there is no resolution passed, then it just becomes in the hands of the leadership of the party, and the leadership of the party tends to follow the perspective of the dominant media. And I think that's part of why we see the NDP explicitly endorsing the core group in Haiti of the foreign ambassadors that basically have been running Haiti for many years, US-Canada-led core group. That's why we see the NDP basically supporting the NATO proxy war. And we see the NDP increasingly on board with the sort of China demonization and explicitly endorsing the Indo-Pacific strategy, where Canada sends more and more military towards China. But thanks a lot for doing this, Julius, and let's hope that they don't block your credentials for the next federal convention.
We'll see. I hope not either. I mean, I think that it was a complete overreaction, and I think that it's not a trend that the party wants to be known for, even as lacking in democracy as it has been for a long time.
Thanks.
Thank you.